Hello, this is Matthew Miller with Nokia Experts, taking a first look walk around of the Nokia N97 Mini. So as you can see, this is the Mini in my hand, and this here is the N97. So on the front, you can see there's a bit of a size difference there. One of the main things on the front that you see is there's a 3.5-inch screen on the N97 and a 3.2 on the N97 Mini. A lot of the front is the same as far as the menu button and the send and end, call and hang up. There's a proximity sensor and things like that. So if we go to the side, see the N97 Mini is quite a bit thinner, and maybe not a ton when you first look at it, but it feels in your hand like it is. And it is also, as we can try to see here, slightly narrower as well. So overall it's just a thinner package. It also has a feel to me that feels more solid, with kind of the metal back and the more solid plastic down here, rather than the whole back that pops off on the N97. Looking at the keyboards, they both are the same as far as the design of how they go sliding up. So you look at the keyboards, and I'll take some images that show this hopefully a little bit better. But there's the difference in, and the lengths are about the same, not too much difference in the width. But what you can kind of see, and I think you can see here in the video, is that the N97 Mini keys have a bit more space in between the keys. The buttons are actually smaller. There is no directional pad. There's directional arrows over on the right, which I actually find myself liking a bit more. And one thing that to me is killer is that the keys have much more travel. On the N97 you can hardly tell if you press a button. On the N97 Mini you can definitely tell it has movement when you press the key. And to me that's a huge factor in usability. You can also see the spacebar is still offset like the N97, however it is a little bit bigger, and I personally like it offset because that's where my right thumb resides the whole time I'm typing. So as I'm typing with it, I'm over here typing, and my thumb is always right there on the space bar, and then the direction arrow is right there rather than over on the left side. So that's kind of a comparison look at the two. Let's just kind of walk around it here. It is, of course, S60 5th edition. Bunch of the same thing as far as customizing the home page, things like that, and then tapping up in the areas up top. Has the same buttons on the bottom, send and end, and then the menu button there. Proximity sensor, front-facing camera. One big difference: this one currently is not available in a US band. However, I saw around on spec sites that it should have an 850 version for AT&T at some point. So if we go over to the right, I think the button placement is actually the same as the N97. I'll kind of look at that. So over the right, you've got your volume up and down and your camera button. On the top, you have your 3.5mm headset jack and your power button. And then on the left side, we've got our stereo speakers. There's one there, one here. Our hold switch, which I love having those on there, and micro USB port with a little light to kind of give you an indicator. And then nothing on the bottom except a lanyard opening down there. So it is the same as far as the around the horn design as the N97. On the back we do have, again, a 5-megapixel Carl Zeiss optics camera with dual LEDs. However, as you can see here, there is no shutter cover, which on the N97 actually was scratching the screen. So this screen is protected just by a piece of plastic. It may get scratched over time. It is kind of indented a little bit. And you can see the end here flips up so that when it rests, it does rest flat on the table, or fairly flat. Then of course we have the keyboard, which I showed a little bit earlier. And this is actually the cherry black colored one. And it also comes in a white as well. So there's the keys. As you can see, they're well backlit, well spaced, and if you were to feel it, you could see that they really do have nice feedback on them. And I find it to be a much better keyboard than the N97. The display, as you can see, is a little bit smaller. Same resolution, so it actually appears a bit crisper. Some other differences in the Mini is that it has 32 gigs of it has 8 gigs of onboard flash, whereas the N97 had 32 gigs. RAM is huge. Let's just go to Task Manager. As you can see the RAM right there. Right now at this moment I have 231 megs, C drive. I have 231 megs in the C drive, whereas on the N97 that was about 49.5 fresh with the latest update. So this is where some apps must install. Most of them I try to load onto the, as you can see, 8 gig drive, but some will go into the C drive by default. And one issue though that I do have with it is there's 128 megs RAM, same as the N97, and as you can see here, after just starting it up, got about 34.2. At the N97 when the new update had about 48 megs, and what we find is that RAM, as you run more and more apps, especially if you do the camera, web, a couple other things, you will run out of memory. I've already gotten one of those memory warnings, and I just don't understand how we can't put either manage that better or put 256 in the RAM. Other things, this still has the same 432 megahertz processor, 434 megahertz processor as the N97. It has a 1200 milliampere battery versus a 1500. And as I said just a second ago, it has 8 gigs versus 32 gigs in the N97. However, still has a micro SD card slot, so you can easily expand that. And to me, if it has 8, it's fine with the micro SD card. I don't have a ton of content, and I can always put in a micro SD card for capturing photos and things like that. I haven't customized my folders too much yet. Has all the fairly standard stuff that you see in a Nokia S60 device. You know, OV Store, Nokia Maps, Music Web, all that. Go jump into applications. It has the Office Web, the Share. Quick was available. Quick was on there. JQ Spot, light version, and then there's a bunch of widgets, a couple new widgets that I haven't seen before: ESPN SoccerNet, CNN Video, Friendster, and then of course I loaded up Gravity, Google Maps, and a couple others. Gravity, of course, is a fantastic application on the N97 and on the Mini, and it's a Twitter application. It's one of the main reasons I would go back to using an N97 Mini. Now I've had some folks obviously asking me already about the N97 Mini versus the N900. These are two kind of different devices. I think, you know, the N900 has 3G on T-Mobile, and the N900 is much more of a mobile computer than a phone. If you're heavily into the browser, the N900 is definitely the choice. The N97 is compact. It's a very nice phone. Of course, the phone quality I've tried so far has been top-notch, just like most Nokias. I'm not sure where the price is coming in at for the Mini yet, but definitely the N900 is more of the geeks kind of device. The N97 is more of the phone device. So those ones are kind of two usage patterns, so I wouldn't really be able to choose between those two. However, if I did have a choice between the N97 and the N97 Mini, personally, I would buy the N97 Mini because I find that the keyboard with the feedback is more usable and has rubber keys, a little bit less slick than the other one. And to me, the keyboard is a big part of this device. Screen resolution, not a big deal. The screen resolution is the same, size a little bit different, and the available on the C drive is a pretty big deal to me. The RAM is still going to be an issue, but to me, I would pick the N97 Mini over the N97. So that's the first look. I'll be spending a few more weeks with the N97 Mini, so stay tuned for more coverage.